Incredible transformation. Discover how this 75-year-old grandma overcame 30 years of trauma. Eleanor sat cross-legged in the attic, rain pattering softly against the roof, a dull drum echoing in her melancholic thoughts. Dust danced in the beams of light sneaking through the cracks, illuminating old memories, abandoned dreams lurking beneath piles of forgotten belongings. The silence echoed. After 50 years of marriage, losing her husband had left her feeling like a shadow in a dim room. Today marked 2 months since his passing, and she felt numb beneath the weight of grief. But as she turned the brittle pages of her grandmother's old journal, something shifted, igniting an ember of hope and possibility in the deep, stagnant waters of her sorrow. Why didn't I ever paint? The words inside the journal questioned her from a past life. Eleanor's heart ached, a reminder that she had spent decades suppressing her own desires to ensure her family's needs were met. In its pages, her grandmother shared fragments of her own unrealized dreams, revealing a talent for painting that she never had the courage to pursue. Eleanor's hand trembled as she traced the faded ink, guilt swirling within her. Did this talent skip a generation? Could she uncover her grandmother's legacy? Yet a terrifying doubt crept in. What if she failed just like her grandmother? She felt a swell of ambition but knew the struggle of reconciling herself with long-standing family expectations. Instinctively, she sensed that starting to paint again might mean challenging everything she had come to accept as her role. The nurturer, the caretaker, the unseen matriarch. What if her family saw her as selfish? Would they scoff at the idea of their elderly matriarch expressing herself? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Doubt clawed at her heart as she envisioned unveiling her artwork at the local library, an experience that filled her with both thrill and terror. What if the townsfolk sneered? A mixed chorus of apprehensive whispers echoed. What does she know about art at her age? Healing emotions spilled onto the canvas, battling against the fear of judgment. It felt frivolous, yet the act of painting was the best therapy she had encountered. It opened a portal to buried dreams and distant memories she had long clutched tightly, suffocating them instead of embracing them. Just as uncertainty crescendoed, the doorbell rang, jolting Eleanor. A familiar but strained voice called her name through the door. Her estranged son. Torn between outrage and longing, she felt the tension tighten her chest, an abyss of unresolved conflict threatening to consume her. What would she say to him, knowing he disapproved of her artistic pursuits? Would he see this passion as a wasted effort? The potential rift between them deepened, intertwined with her unfulfilled aspirations. As Eleanor stood frozen, a paintbrush dangling from her fingers like a lifeline, she realized all at once that both her art and her son's disapproval tugged her in opposite directions. Would she step into the light and take a stand for herself, or was she destined to slip back into the shadows, dampened by grief and familial obligation? The tension coiled around her, and with every breath, the weight of the moment loomed closer, an exhale away from either sacred liberation or paralyzing capitulation. Eleanor hesitated at the door, the paintbrush still poised in her hand. Every sound around her felt amplified. The relentless rain drumming against the roof, the trembling of her own heartbeat. She had spent her life accommodating the needs of others. Could she finally embrace her own aspirations, starting here at this threshold? With a deep breath, she opened the door. Her son Richard stood there, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but strained. She waved him inside, feeling both anxious and guilty, the remnants of familial discord clinging to them like cobwebs. As Richard entered, he scanned the attic, taking in the chaotic mementos of Eleanor's past, their family history, the nostalgia lingering like a ghost in the shadows. "I'm worried about you," he said, an intense gaze meeting hers. "You can't just shut yourself away. It's not healthy." And there it was, her heart racing anew at the confrontation. "I'm not shutting myself away," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm finding myself again. For the first time in years, I'm rediscovering who I am." The words hung between them like a fragile crystal, beautiful yet precarious. Would they shatter under scrutiny? By painting? He challenged, the incredulity evident in his tone. Is this really who you are? You're 75, Mom. Shouldn't you focus on family? On us? His words cut sharply, a painful reminder of expectations that laced through their history. Eleanor felt a rising tide of defiance. The little girl inside her, who had once yearned to paint and create, pushed against the walls she had built over decades. Family means supporting each other's passions, Richard. It means allowing me to explore my dreams, too. Richard narrowed his eyes, and Eleanor saw a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps just anger. But what about your responsibilities? The word responsibilities tasted bitter. How often had it stood in the way of her dreams? The spark of a newfound determination ignited within her. She had spent so long in service to other people's expectations that the mere notion of following her own felt rebellious. What if I fail? What if I'm terrible? She posed as a challenge half-heartedly. What if I break the family mold? Richard seemed taken aback, but beneath it, she sensed the hint of respect growing. Then you learn, like I did with my mistakes. And maybe it will inspire us all to be more than we think we can be. His words roused something deeper in Eleanor, a flicker of hope amidst uncertainty. While still tinged with fear, she felt empowered to reject guilt about choosing her own path. This confrontation had opened a door she thought was long shut. It also showed her how fractured their relationship had become. A mosaic missing too many pieces. The road ahead wasn't just about art. It was about healing, connection, and redefining what it meant to be a mother. I want to show you something, Eleanor suddenly declared, heart racing. She grabbed a canvas from the pile nearby and set it before her son, paintbrush trembling again in her hand. Would this gesture spark his understanding? Richard regarded the paint-splattered canvas, confusion morphing into intrigue. This is okay, he muttered, slowly circling it with curiosity. Eleanor felt a surge of excitement mixed with vulnerability. This could be her moment, not just to unveil her work, but to unveil herself. Would he see her passions the way she saw them, as vital and real? As Richard peered closer, contemplating the bold strokes and unexpected colors, Eleanor took a deep breath. This was not just about her becoming an artist, it was about opening the door to dialogue, to possibility. And as anticipation and anxiety warred within her, an unexpected realization dawned. What if revealing this part of herself could mend more than her own heart? What if it could bridge the chasm between them? They were standing on the precipice of a new understanding. Could it finally ignite a change in their relationship? A single question echoed in Eleanor's mind, rising like a tide with each heartbeat. Would Richard embrace her transformation, or would he retreat again, leaving her alone with her paintbrush? The answer loomed like an unfinished canvas just waiting for the first stroke. Richard took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he parsed through the chaos of color on the canvas. Each brushstroke had been a burst of emotion, capturing fragments of her journey. Dark shadows mingled with vibrant hues that suggested hope. Eleanor's heart raced as she navigated the treacherous waters of vulnerability. What do you see? She ventured, attempting to mask the tremor in her voice. His gaze shifted, moving beyond the surface to the swirling emotions represented there. It's different, he said slowly, weighing his words. I mean, it's not the kind of painting I expected. Eleanor felt a flicker of pride swell within her. It's not meant to be. It's a reflection of me, of everything I've held inside for so long. She hesitated, then pressed on. I've painted my pain, my joy, and my fears. I want you to understand. Richard's expression softened. This was the moment, she thought. Could he comprehend the bridge she was attempting to build between them? It's abstract, he said tentatively, which means it can be interpreted in various ways. I find that interesting. Encouraged by his words, Eleanor nodded. Life is abstract, Richard. I've realized that only now. I spent years trying to fit into boxes, your father's expectations, society's norms, and even my own guilt. Painting relieves that pressure. She studied his face, longing to see understanding resonate within him. But Richard's brow furrowed slightly, as if grappling with a sensation he did not yet grasp. It was a momentary frustration for Eleanor, but it was also a reflection of the process they were both undergoing. Mom, I know you're trying to express yourself, but what will this really change? His tone wasn't dismissive, more inquisitive, as if he was genuinely seeking to bridge a gap. Is this about escaping your responsibilities or pursuing dreams you've let go of? Eleanor felt resistance rise. I'm not escaping anything. This journey is about taking control of my own narrative. It's about healing something I didn't allow myself to do for decades. Richard crossed his arms. It was an instinctual defensive posture. But how can I support you if I don't know what you really want? This feels like a band-aid on deeper issues. The sting in his words was undeniable. She had wanted understanding, not confrontation. But a part of her recognized the truth. Perhaps their conflict was rooted in her unfinished business. Old wounds that both needed to address. I want to explore art beyond just this canvas, Eleanor admitted, her voice quieter now. I want to take classes, join a community where people create together. I want more than simply being an onlooker in my life. Time seemed to suspend as Richard absorbed her words. Would he judge her ambitions, relegating them to reckless pursuits associated with aging? He exhaled slowly. And what will happen if you don't get that support from the family? What if you fail? The question hung heavily, weighing on both of them. Eleanor swallowed hard. Then I will have learned what doesn't work for me. But the fear of failure can't stop me from trying. I can't keep imprisoning myself by worrying how others perceive my choices. Richard's gaze softened further, and she saw unspoken tension ebb slightly. What about the time you could spend with us? The reminder cut deeply, sending a fresh wave of guilt through Eleanor. Was her newfound path selfish? Did pursuing art mean sacrificing family connections? She pressed her lips together, fighting a wave of tears. This doesn't mean I care any less for you. In fact, I believe that pursuing my passions fortifies our connection. I want to show you that it's okay to embrace who you are, she said, voice quivering with conviction. Maybe there's room for both, Richard responded lightly, as if considering the truth behind her words. But what if you stumble? What if I can't be there every step of the way? If her success hinged on his constant support, would she find herself hesitating? The fear gripped Eleanor. But in that moment, she found clarity. Then I will rise again. Each stroke of the brush is a choice. Each choice is a part of me I rediscover. The room felt alive with tension and possibility, awaiting the next step. The uncertain road ahead loomed large, painting her uncertainty in vivid colors. Richard, still studying her, finally nodded. I guess we both have fears to work through then. Eleanor breathed in, a mix of hope and apprehension flooding her senses. Somehow they had entered unfamiliar territory, a shared commitment to personal growth against the backdrop of family ties. As she allowed herself to lean into the moment, Eleanor felt the weight of her choices pressing against her brow like fresh paint on canvas. She could see a path emerging, fraught with uncertainty yet splattered with potential. Would you consider joining me in a class? She asked, testing the waters of their connection. Richard paused, eyes narrowing again, but this time not in resistance, more as if imagining a future where they could both create together. Maybe, he said finally. But first let us talk about what that would actually look like. I need to understand what it might mean for us. Eleanor smiled, sensing a shift toward deeper dialogue. With uncertainty still intact, she couldn't help but feel an anticipation bloom. Would they really begin navigating the complex web of their relationship step by fragile step? The paintbrush was poised, but this time it was their shared colors that awaited the first stroke. Would they be brave enough to create together? Eleanor stood before the canvas, the vibrant colors swirling around her like a tempest of emotions. But now, something new simmered beneath her surface, a determination that had previously felt foreign. She sensed this was not just an exercise in self-expression. It was a profound shift that would redefine her trajectory. The conversation with Richard had left her fraught with contemplation. What does it mean to be an artist at this stage of my life? She mused. The question emerged unbidden, wrapping around her thoughts as she calculated her next steps with a newfound urgency. Art classes floated between fantasies and realities. The thought of painting alongside strangers, sharing her vulnerability, frightened her. Yet, tethered to her conviction, she resolved to embrace the possibility. It was time to bridge the gap between her aspirations and reality. Picking up her brush, she took a deep breath, letting it flow into her strokes. They were purposeful yet unrefined, mirroring her inner conflict. Eleanor painted her uncertainty and excitement in tandem. Layers of doubt washed alongside bold swaths of color that illustrated hope. Each movement began to feel like a ceremony of vulnerability, a release of what was, an invitation for what could be. With paint splattered on her hands and traces on her apron, she transitioned from canvas to reflection. She jotted ideas on a notepad, crafting a mission statement of sorts. What did she want from these classes? Connection? Growth? The thrill of learning something new? A vibration from her phone snapped her back. It was a text from Richard. "I'm here if you want me to join. Just let me know." The simplicity of his words flooded her with warmth. However, with that warmth came a wave of apprehension as she considered the depth of what it would mean to work through this transformational process together. What if her passion was met with judgment? What if Richard couldn't understand? But an unsettling truth dawned on Eleanor. The fear of judgment was just another layer of the box she yearned to break free from. She needed to view it not through a lens of perfectionism, but as a journey filled with imperfections. She texted back, each word calculated. "I think it would be amazing to explore this together. But can we make a promise? Let us both commit to being honest about our experiences, whatever they may be." The seconds stretched into minutes as she waited for a response. In that waiting period, Eleanor saw herself small, uncertain, her self-worth dangling threadbare. But were they not paving the way for growth? Shaking her head at her spiraling thoughts, she plunged back into the canvas, channeling her thoughts through color. The realization washed over her as she navigated the chaos of paint that this process was not just about art, it was about confronting fears, unveiling courage, and building trust with herself and Richard. Each stroke symbolized not merely paint on canvas but her commitment to a life unlaced from expectations. As night descended and the room dimmed, she stepped back, observing the painting in its entirety. The energy pulsed rough around the edges but imbued with life, much like her journey. For the first time, Eleanor felt a sense of pride, an ember of identity rekindling within. The following morning, unsure yet ready to confront this new chapter, she found herself in front of the computer. The art class schedules glared back at her, each window offering tantalizing glimpses of possibilities. In a moment of impulsive bravery, she clicked on registration for a local class starting in 2 weeks. Would it be easy? No. Would it challenge her in ways she couldn't anticipate? Absolutely. But nestled within that uncertainty was a truth she could hold close: her endeavor wasn't solely for her. It was a legacy of courage for Richard, showing him that it was okay to explore beyond the confines of expectation. As Eleanor settled back into her work, she marveled at how her life had shifted, how vulnerability had become her strength. A new text buzzed on her phone. It was Richard. Again, cryptic but promising. "They confirm the classes are mixed level. Let us meet today to plan what we want to learn. No pressure." Eleanor stared at his message, a whirl of excitement and anxiety colliding in her chest. Did Richard envision the same vibrant world of art she was beginning to see? Was this the start of a new connectivity, not just in creating art but in healing bonds? She felt a tingling urge to leap into this unknown future, not merely painting with brushes but with choices that sculpted her life. Would they really truly explore this landscape of creativity together? With the answer just on the cusp of discovery, she typed back her agreement, eager to delve deeper into the path ahead. The anticipation felt electric, a mixture of hope and apprehension. Despite her uncertainties, the driving force behind her decision felt palpable. Would she have the courage to face the intricacies of her relationship with Richard and redefine the ties that bound them? Her journey was just beginning, and the canvas of life awaited its next brushstroke. But could she navigate the complexities that lie ahead without losing sight of herself in the process? Eleanor stepped into the cafe, the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans mingling with the crisp morning air, grounding her as she moved toward the window table where Richard awaited. Bright sunlight streamed in, illuminating the slight shadows beneath her eyes, remnants of restless nights spent contemplating her impending venture into the art class. Each step toward him felt like a commitment to unraveling threads of uncertainty she had clung to for so long. Richard greeted her with an encouraging smile, though she could sense a flicker of nerves beneath his casual demeanor. As they settled, Eleanor felt an urge to dive into their discussion, to seize the momentum and clarity she had experienced while painting. They shared their anticipation over steaming mugs, and her heart raced with each word. What are you hoping to learn? Richard asked, his question a bridge between their worlds. It was simple yet profound, allowing space for exploration. Eleanor contemplated his inquiry with the seriousness of a sculptor considering the marble before chiseling away. Would she be bold enough to share her vulnerabilities? Was she prepared to strip away the layers that had shielded her from broader experiences? I want to push my boundaries and grow, she admitted, her voice steady but her heart pounding. I've spent too many years cautious about pursuing what I love. I'm ready to embrace learning at any level, even if it means stumbling. It's more about the journey than the outcome, right? Richard nodded, a glint of understanding sparking in his eyes. What if we approach this like an experiment, a way to rediscover our creativity and not worry about the final product? Eleanor's pulse quickened. Experimentation, she could feel the edges of her fears softening. It sounded freeing, a delicate dance with failure as part of growth. Exactly. I want to make mistakes and learn from them. I want it to be fun, not a chore. As she spoke, a revelation flickered in her mind. Opening up about her fears felt liberating, as if each sentence she uttered peeled back layers of self-doubt. This conversation was not merely about art. It was about redefining herself and creating a narrative where vulnerability was a badge of honor, rather than a source of shame. The cafe morphed into a sanctuary of shared aspirations, a firmament where both their ambitions could take flight. Eleanor could tell that Richard was invigorated too. Could this be their shared metamorphosis, a moment where they both stepped into a new version of themselves? Conversations flowed, visions emerged, and possibilities expanded as they meticulously drafted what they hoped to achieve in the art class. The excitement bristled in the air like static, yet alongside it, an undercurrent of tension teased at Eleanor's consciousness. The weight of unrealized expectations lingered. What if they did not meet their own aspirations? As they prepared to leave, Richard turned to her, his expression thoughtful. Eleanor, I'm really glad we are doing this together. Just remember, we have to support each other through the ups and downs. Art can be revealing, and it might bring things to the surface we didn't anticipate. Her heart constricted at his words. The depths of vulnerability he spoke of loomed large and intimidating. What if underlying traumas erupted, disrupting the harmony they were gently crafting? She held his gaze, purpose burning in her chest. I promise to be open, and I trust you will be too. As they departed, Eleanor's mind swirled with possibility. What began as an agreement to attend art classes had evolved into a deep commitment to exploration and creativity, a pact intertwined with support and understanding. They were poised on the brink of transformation, both as individuals and as a duo. Yet doubt continued to echo in her mind. How would they handle challenges that might arise, especially if they unearthed hidden insecurities or conflicts? Eleanor felt her breath catch as she stepped outside into the open air, the horizon reflecting her mixed feelings of excitement and apprehension. Would this experience open doors to unexamined parts of their identities, places shrouded in the shadows of their past? As she walked away with Richard, Eleanor made a silent vow to confront whatever lay ahead with courage. A new message pinged on her phone, and Eleanor glanced down to find a notification from the art class organizer. Don't forget, the first session will involve a group exercise revealing personal stories through your chosen colors. Eleanor's heart raced. Would she truly share her story? And what if her revelations impacted both her and Richard's dynamic? The path ahead was thrillingly uncertain, and with each step, she felt the tension of the question tighten. How far was she willing to go to discover her authentic self? The day of the first art class dawned, and Eleanor awoke with an unsettling mixture of eagerness and dread. The idea of unveiling her inner world through color was thrilling, yet it also felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure if she had the courage to leap. As she dressed, each piece of clothing felt like armor, both protective and constricting. Stepping out into the brisk morning air, Eleanor was greeted by a vibrant sunrise, hues of orange and pink illuminating the sky. It didn't go unnoticed. The brilliance of the colors outside mirrored her own inner tumult. She met Richard at the entrance to the gallery-turned-studio, where their art journey would begin. His presence steadied her racing heart, yet an undercurrent of anxiety remained as they walked inside. The room buzzed with a mix of nervous energy and anticipation. Splashes of paint adorned the walls and chaotic bursts of creativity seemed to permeate the atmosphere. Other participants, all expressions of various backgrounds and experiences, gathered in small clusters, exchanging laughter and tentative smiles. Eleanor could feel her confidence wavering. The prospect of sharing her story felt increasingly daunting. The instructor, a spirited woman with colorful tattoos snaking up her arms, welcomed them warmly. Today's exercise is about using colors to express your emotions and personal stories. Don't hold back. Let the colors speak for you. Her enthusiasm was infectious but also intimidating. Eleanor swallowed hard, acknowledging Richard's encouraging smile from across the room. They had each promised vulnerability, yet now the reality felt heavier than she anticipated. What if exploring her emotions left her exposed or worse, misunderstood? After a few introductory exercises, the room's dynamic shifted toward the personal stories they would soon share through their art. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. What did she want to express? Layers upon layers of experiences, stained with shadows of regret, flourished behind her closed eyelids. Would each brushstroke reveal too much? Or could it instead uncover an unrecognized resilience? The decision loomed as she approached her canvas. She hesitated, contemplating the colors around her. Each shade called out to her in ways that were familiar yet frightening. The vibrant red reminded her of anger, a fire that had simmered for years. Blue whispered of sadness, an old companion she had thought she conquered. Yet, as she prepared to touch the brush to the canvas, a realization struck her: the journey might not merely be about what she was willing to share but the power in that sharing itself. She dipped the brush into a deep dark green, a color representing growth but also the discomfort of change. With each stroke, as the dense liquid spread across the canvas, her hesitations began dissipating into the space around her. Meanwhile, Richard was concurrently wrestling with his own choices. She could glimpse him in quiet concentration, selecting and mixing colors, seemingly conflicted about what to draw forth from his depths. Eleanor could sense that this moment was not just a challenge for her. It was equally daunting for him. The instructor circled the room, encouraging dialogue between their individual works. Art is a conversation, she reminded them. Listen to your canvas. It knows what needs to be expressed. Suddenly, Eleanor felt the weight of her choices, a decision to either confront her past or continue burying it. As the time ticked away, Richard approached her, eyes holding an earnest concern. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. The moment of truth hung in the air, pressed against the backdrop of their shared fears. "I'm scared," she admitted, the honesty flowing from her lips. "What if I reveal too much? What if I don't measure up?" He nodded, a shared understanding passing silently between them. "What if you discover something you've kept hidden? Perhaps we have to confront those fears to emerge stronger." Eleanor considered this as she glanced back at her canvas, which now bore a mix of colors fighting for dominance. The taboo of her vulnerabilities flashed before her like the canvas begging for life. Could this be the moment of breakthrough, or merely a prelude to deeper complexities? Just then, the instructor called for their attention to gather and share their creations. Each participant's nervous energy intermingled with intrigue, setting the stage for revelations. Eleanor felt a tightening in her chest. What choice would she make in that crucial moment? As Richard and she prepared to share, she realized the fear of exposure could fuel her transformation rather than hinder it. But was she truly ready to set her story free? In that charged silence beneath the eager eyes of her peers, Eleanor took a steadying breath. And then she took a step forward, brush in hand, ready to navigate uncharted territory. The words began to form in her mind even before she could voice them, teasing out a fathomless yearning. What would happen when shadows met the light? The room hushed, anticipation hanging thick in the air like the pigment on Eleanor's brush. She could feel the weight of her peers' eyes urging her forward, their own struggles mirrored in the quiet intensity around them. Heart racing, she hardly recognized the rhythm of her breaths. Richard's encouraging presence anchored her. She clutched onto it like a lifeline. "Art is a conversation," the instructor had said, and Eleanor felt the truth of that echo in her mind. Would her canvas speak the language of her sorrow, of her fears? Or would it unveil the light she believed existed beyond the shadows? Gathering her courage, she began. "This piece," she started, her voice steadying as she spoke into the silence, "represents my journey, a battle of colors that don't always blend harmoniously." Her fingers trembled, unsure yet resolute as she gestured toward vibrant strokes of blue and teetering shades of dark green. The blue is sadness, my old friend, appearing in waves. It pulls at me, reminding me of loss and the regrets that linger. As the words rolled off her tongue, they simultaneously stripped away layers of secrecy that had long clouded her heart. Something within Eleanor began to unfurl, growing stronger with each passing moment. She saw Richard nod thoughtfully, an affirmation that ignited her determination. And this green, she continued, gathering momentum, it symbolizes the hope that has taken root through the darkest periods of my life. It grows reluctantly. Every inch is a struggle. But it's here, and it has not given up on me. She paused, looking around at her classmates, who watched her with a mix of empathy and intrigue. Their own struggles mirrored hers. Beasts they wrestled silently, a flicker of disbelief danced at the edges of her self-awareness. Could this be her moment? As she took in the expressions around her, curiosity, vulnerability, understanding, she realized she was no longer just an observer of their emotions. She had stepped into a conversation where her voice mattered. Eleanor's heart surged as she saw Richard's encouraging smile, and with that spark, she pressed on. I've spent years buried under layers of pain, trying to conceal every bruise and scrape, convinced that my experiences were a burden. Was she breaking through the walls that had caged her for so long? Yes, she whispered to herself, feeling a newfound lightness accompany her resolve. To embrace these scars is to reclaim my story. The words flowed freely, no longer just thoughts but a stream of color painting her reality. She recalled all the moments of retreat, all the times she had felt invisible, and instead, transformed those recollections into strokes that defined her canvas. As she looked down at her artwork, a chaotic symphony of colors capturing her essence, she felt an emerging strength swell within. This was a new chapter, shimmering on the horizon. She hungered to explore further, to push the boundaries of her own self-imposed constraints. When she finished sharing, a ripple of applause broke out around her. It was tentative at first, a response to vulnerability, but then grew stronger, invigorated by their collective experiences. Eleanor took a deep breath, an exhilarating blend of apprehension and exhilaration surging through her. She had unveiled herself to her peers, and in doing so, felt bridges beginning to form instead of walls. But just as she began to bask in this newfound connection, she could sense Richard's quiet hesitance, a storm brewing behind his bright eyes. Did he not feel the same pull of liberation? She caught his glance, a flicker of something unexpressed lingering between them. Gathering her thoughts, Eleanor wondered if Richard would share the depth of his own story. What fears did he harbor? And more importantly, what would happen next if their vulnerability wove a tighter bond? As the next participant began to speak, Eleanor's heart raced anew, not only with anticipation for what they would reveal, but also with a question that hung in the air. Could revealing their truths together lead them to uncover the hidden strengths they both possessed? Eleanor's thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of curiosity and a touch of apprehension as the next participant began to share. She couldn't help but wonder whether anyone else felt the same weight of unsaid stories pressing against their hearts. Richard's gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat longer than usual, stirring a peculiar mix of encouragement and intimidation within her. She had lifted the veil on her emotions, yet the urge to connect more deeply with both him and her peers tugged at her relentlessly. What if they could all reshape their narratives together? Could they create a canvas rich with shared emotions, a tapestry of resilience? The voice of the participant washed over her, a soothing melody filled with raw revelations. Each confession felt like peeling layers off a fragile onion, exposing tears and laughter. Yet, as Eleanor listened, she noted how often the struggles mirrored her own. There was a delicate strength and vulnerability that she hadn't fully grasped until she had spoken her truth. However, the exhilaration she had felt moments earlier now shifted into an unsettling doubt. She could hear a faint whisper in her mind, questioning whether her experience had truly resonated or simply been a momentary outburst. Did her voice matter in the grand scheme of things? She gauged the faces around her again, searching for signs of impact or indifference. Richard was next. His silence felt like a palpable weight in the room. As he shifted in his seat, Eleanor caught his eye again, but this time she saw a labyrinth of emotions reflecting back at her. Fear. Shame. There was so much left unsaid, and her heart constricted at the thought of him holding back his wounds. What if I pushed him? She pondered, battling with her instincts. The notion of stepping outside her own vulnerability to encourage his felt almost selfish. But perhaps if she could bare her scars for him, it might embolden him to reveal his own. Then she recalled how liberating her own revelation had been. It was time to offer him the same opportunity. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor decided to go again. The room was still, all attention on her as she cleared her throat. Richard has been an incredible presence for me, she began. Her voice steady despite the pulse of uncertainty thrumming within her. He has inspired me to share my story, to own my past. But I know he carries his own. And I think it's time for him to speak too. A ripple of surprise coursed through her classmates. The silence stretched, taut and filled with possibilities. Richard blinked, visibly taken aback. His anxious energy seemed to bounce between them like a charged spark. Eleanor, he started, his voice faltering. She watched as he wrestled with the enormity of her encouragement. In that moment, she realized she wasn't just pushing him to speak. She was building a bridge back to herself. By standing beside him, she was reinforcing her own commitment to vulnerability. She felt alive, empowered, as she prepared to support him no matter how disconcerting it might be. But suddenly, she sensed a profound tension in the room. A familiar nod of instinct told her it was not simply here in this space, but something deeper, perhaps a trauma Richard himself was grappling with. His eyes flickered with urgency. The walls she once felt closing in around her now viscerally present for him. As Eleanor met his gaze, the gravity of the unspoken lingered in the air. Would Richard succumb to the fear? Or would he step forward, let the truth break free? Her heartbeat quickened, anxiety mixing with anticipation, knowing that they were playing with forces far beyond their individual stories. Would this be the moment they both needed for growth, a crucial intersection that could reshape their futures? The tension curdled in her stomach, an uncomfortable reminder that some moments are fragile and must be handled with care. As the silence echoed, Eleanor's heart danced on the precipice of anxiety and hope. Would they transform together? Or would their paths diverge once more? The answer hung in the air, awaiting the next step. Eleanor watched Richard as uncertainty clouded his expression. The moment felt suspended in time, her heart racing with a mix of hope and dread. She had extended a lifeline, yet here they now stood at a precipice, staring down at the unknown. Would he grasp her hand? Or would he let the darkness swallow him? As seconds stretched, she contemplated the consequences of her act. She could still feel the weight of her own confession resting heavily in the air, vibrating with potential. What if Richard's story could transform them both? But then again, what if he withdrew? The stakes felt alarmingly personal. Eleanor felt her own vulnerability naked before the group and couldn't help but wrestle with the implications of that exposure. Richard swallowed hard, his brow furrowing as he gazed at the floor. Did he realize how pivotal this moment was, not just for him but for her as well? She sensed that his hesitance was more profound than fear. Perhaps it was rooted in a profound sense of responsibility for the truths he carried. The thought stirred a mixture of empathy and frustration within her. "Eleanor," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can share what's inside. You don't know the depths." There it was, the barrier, laden with echoes of past pain. Words that dug deeper than just insecurity. His statement was a testament to the identity he protective built around his scars. Eleanor's heart sank. The realization that Richard may not be ready ignited a bolt of determination within her. Perhaps instead of pushing him, she could create a safe space for him to find his footing. "You're right," she responded, her voice imbued with understanding. "I don't know everything, but what I do know is that your voice matters, Richard. You deserve to share it on your terms." Eleanor watched as the tension in Richard's shoulders began to soften. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but there was a slight shift. The tightening of fear began to thread itself with curiosity. She felt that his reluctance to speak was not just a reflection of personal turmoil. It was an opportunity for growth, an opening for them both to redefine what vulnerability looked like. Eleanor turned her focus inward. This was about more than Richard. It was also a chance for her to solidify her own resolve. Each silent flicker of doubt she felt wasn't a weakness but an indicator of her growth. If she could encourage him to unveil his truth, would that fortify her own understanding of her place in the world? The atmosphere surrounding them rippled with anticipation, a collective breath held in unison. She decided to share a bit more of her own history. I understand how difficult this can be. I felt the pressure of expectations, the fear of judgment. But with every word I spoke, I felt a weight lift. It's a clear reminder that we're not alone. Richard's watchful gaze met hers, embers of hope igniting in his eyes as he processed her words. His silence radiated strength as if he was gauging the trustworthiness of this newfound connection. The room began to breathe deeply alongside them, hands clenched in empathy, waiting to hear the unfiltered version of Richard that had been waiting just beneath the surface. Eleanor felt vulnerable yet empowered by her willingness to openly support him. But what if she found himself challenging her own boundaries in return? Would she be able to handle what lay beyond the vulnerable exterior she carefully crafted? The unbroken silence loomed. Would this be the moment where Richard found his voice and pulled Eleanor along with him? Or would he choose to stay shackled, leaving both their stories lingering in the realm of what-ifs? As Richard took a deep breath, the tension thickened. Eleanor wondered what words would spill from his lips next. The air crackled with possibility, both exhilarating and terrifying. The crossroads deepened. Together they could leap into uncharted territory, or he could remain silent, leaving her to question everything all over again. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her, the next moment. Critical for both of them. Would they find clarity together? Or would the truth remain shrouded in ambiguity? The room was silent, all eyes fixed on them, the energy electric. Beside Eleanor, Richard exhaled sharply, as if the anticipation had become a physical weight on his chest. Yet, in that heavy silence, something shifted within him. His posture straightened, eyes flickering with vulnerability instead of trepidation. "Eleanor," he began, his voice steady but soft, "I appreciate you opening this door for me. It's taken a lot to even consider stepping through it." Eleanor's heart raced with hope. Their journey had brought them to this moment, the possibility of mutual transformation hanging in the air like the colors on their canvases. Richard continued, "I felt like I had to hold it all inside for so long. Sometimes being strong means burying what hurts deep down." His eyes met Eleanor's, a flicker of fear revealing that unprocessed pain was just beneath the surface. The words echoed like a confession, shattering the long-standing assumptions of their relationship. "I'm scared to fall apart in front of others. Scared of how my memories may leave me exposed." This admission resonated deeply within Eleanor. She too had feared this exposure, yet here she stood in solidarity with him. "But I don't want to keep living for everyone else anymore either. I want the both of us to be honest about who we are and what we've been through," Richard asserted. There it was. The door to connection was wide open. Eleanor smiled, recognizing their shared vulnerability as a beacon of strength. "We can embrace all of our stories, Richard," she affirmed. "This isn't a burden. It's a shared journey. Letting it out is how we learn and grow from what we've endured." Richard nodded slowly, processing her words. The room felt as if it inhaled collectively, waiting for the next stroke on this shared canvas of their histories. "What if I shared a piece of my past?" Richard's voice thickened with emotion, but she could see the shift. It was an effort to disentangle fear from growth. "I've always felt like I had to be the one holding everyone's pain together. It's exhausting telling myself I had to be strong for the family." "I get that," Eleanor replied, her voice thick with understanding. "Holding on to pain for others is not strength. It's a chain that binds us both." A serene vulnerability encapsulated them. Richard's eyes glimmered with resolve. "I don't want to carry it alone anymore." He turned slightly, addressing the room. "My father, during the hard times in our family, always said that showing emotion was a weakness. Those words stuck with me, but I think it's okay to feel. To be raw." Eleanor felt a rush of reverence for his bravery. He was shattering old beliefs. "This piece of me that I've hidden," Richard gestured toward his canvas, "is how I felt trapped in expectations. Each stroke of gray connects to those moments I needed support, but felt I had to hide my struggles." The cheers from their classmates filled the air, like filling a canvas with bold colors. With newfound momentum, he pressed on, crafting a narrative of liberation from years of unexpressed feelings. Eleanor watched in awe as he shared, recounting memories that had been buried in silence for far too long. A palpable shift enveloped the room, binding their stories together like a tapestry woven from shared threads of struggle and resolve. And then it happened. Richard turned to Eleanor, the weight of his previously held narrative lifted. Thank you for encouraging me to speak. I didn't realize how much I needed this. I didn't think at this stage in my life, I could find new strength alongside you. He confessed, gratitude radiating in his eyes with tears in her own. Eleanor felt the shift within her heart as if each revelation had been painted onto her canvas. They had both confronted old burdens and instead of hiding in shadows, had stepped into a vibrant light together. This newly found connection sparked a profound transformation within Eleanor. The blend of empowerment and vulnerability wasn't just a testament to their bond. It was an expansion of her identity. She realized she wasn't merely winning a battle of self-expression. She was establishing her legacy through resilience, proving to herself and Richard that it wasn't too late to redefine their paths in the age-old gallery of her life. This was no longer about just pasting memories onto the walls. This was reclamation, a vibrant display of who they both were and who they could become. Hand in hand, each brushstroke illuminating fresh potential. With a heartbeat of solid confidence, Eleanor stood tall beside Richard. They had broken the mold, conquering years of expectations, proving that reinvention was possible. What once felt like burdens and responsibilities were now joined in a collaborative spirit of understanding. As the final applause echoed around them, enveloping them in a wave of recognition, Eleanor smiled brightly. Together, they had achieved an authentic union of growth, resilience, and newfound identity, both as individual artists and intricately connected souls. This was the moment they had waited for, the culmination of struggles reshaped into powerful affirmations. They were no longer simply mother and son. They were artists, storytellers, and above all fearless creators of their own destinies. Oh, not wait even one more second to share this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to follow their inspiring tale of strength and vulnerability. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the story of personal growth to those who need it. Comment your thoughts and theories on Richard and Eleanor's metamorphosis. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who must see this uplifting conclusion. Their triumph is just the beginning. Join us for more remarkable stories that ignite the spirit.